This is Helen Johnson, and I am interviewing Dr. Frank Drenner for my personal project, Oral History, for Oral History 5345 at Texas State University. It is 2 o'clock on November 19th of 2021. We are conducting this interview by Zoom. Reverend Drenner is in his office at the church in Sherman, Texas, and I am at my home in Bryan, Texas. Dr. Drenner, have you had an opportunity to read the release form that I shared with you?
I did, yeah.
And you do consent to being recorded?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. When and where were you born?
I was born in Bay City, Texas in February 1971.
Okay. And where did you grow up?
I grew up in Bay City. I was there for most of my 18 years until I graduated from high school.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about your life growing up in Bay City. Were your parents from there?
Originally, I mean, they were all my family is from that same area, and they're all still down there as well. Very rarely do people leave, seems like. So yeah, I had kind of an idyllic childhood growing up in a small town. Was there for, like I said, almost all of my all the way through secondary school, and lots of close family relationships there, and it was just a great place to grow up.
Oh, that's good. That's good. And tell me about your formal education after high school in Bay City. What did you do?
I have a bachelor's degree in history from Sam Houston State in Huntsville, and then I have, and so I after graduating, was waiting on job offers to come from school districts around the state, and my mom, I was living at home. I'd moved back home. My mom urged me to get up off the couch and start helping out with the youth group at our home church there in Bay City. And I started doing that. I really enjoyed that, loved it, and ended up working as a youth minister for a church near Houston on a part-time basis. And then eventually got a teaching job. So I was doing both, teaching full-time and doing youth ministry part-time. And then just kind of had a calling to ordain ministry full-time. And so I left the teaching gig and moved to Dallas to attend seminary at SMU, which is where I got my Master of Divinity from. And then later, 10 years after that, I got a Doctor of Ministry from Wesley Theological Seminary, which is in Washington, D.C.
Oh, wow. Wow. And how long have you lived in Grayson County?
I've lived in Grayson County for 5.5 years.
Yeah. Okay. And all of that time in Sherman?
Yeah.
Okay. And where are you currently employed?
I'm the pastor at Grace United Methodist in Sherman. So as a United Methodist pastor, we're assigned to the churches we serve by our bishop and appointive cabinet. And so I've been in ministry in the North Texas area since the late 90s. So for almost 25 years, just kind of bounced around. And so we've been in our 6th year now here at Grace.
Okay. And are you concerned about any possible repercussions for you because you have been involved in this marker project?
No. I mean, there are. I mean, I guess I'd have to say that there are some people in the congregation that aren't particularly happy, not just with me, but the churches. Many of the leaders have been involved with working for this marker, and then we also established earlier this year a George Hughes Memorial Scholarship Fund
I
here.
did hear about that. That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I'll get you to tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, sorry, go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, you can do it now. I mean,
Okay.
because I'd love to know more about how that came about.
Okay. Well, I'll finish my other thought first.
Okay.
Just about personally, no, not concerned at all. There's some hesitation by some people in the church about with the issue of doing anti-racist work in general in this particular time frame, about the church becoming too political or whatever. So I have to fall back to first of all my own beliefs as a Christian and as a pastor, but also on our churches, our congregations' values. And so Grace has done anti-racist type work for years, well before I ever came here, well before anyone at the church was involved in any kind of marker movement or anything like that. So a lot of times we just have to remind people of the values of our congregation and the priorities that we've set, and say that the things that we're doing are very consistent with those. So for example, the scholarship fund, one of our priorities, well, two of them were for Grace to become a hub of community action. So a place where we can connect people to things going on in the community. So not necessarily looking for people to come to worship here, although if that happens, that's wonderful, but how our congregation can be a vehicle to connect people. So the scholarship connects people. It literally connects the church to the community. Another one of those priorities was to reach out to young people, especially from the ages of 15 to 35. Well, the scholarship is designed for high school students going into college. They're in that range. So, whenever I get pushback about certain things, I just fall back to those priorities and just say, our leadership and we feel like these are consistent. And how do you think that they're inconsistent or not? Sorry.
Do you think the pushback is people are against it, or they're just afraid of kind of upsetting the apple cart, kind of?
Well, I think that there's just a thing in Grayson County about forgetting this history, just not telling the story at all. It's not taught in public schools, and so people who've lived here their whole lives don't know the story and didn't know it until this marker team started pushing it and going on television and doing interviews and those kind of things. So it's just kind of that tendency to keep that stuff buried and not talked about in a public way.
Because it's so unpleasant. Let's just not talk about it.
It's unpleasant to certain people, right? And then I would counter with, well, if God calls us to be people of justice and we aren't doing anything to right past injustices, then how are we living into the people we claim to be? As United Methodists, one of the commitments we make when we baptize someone is that we will be people who stand against wrong. And if we don't do that, then there's a potential for even more harm to happen in the community. So our churches, we established that scholarship fund. When that marker group started meeting here at the church, they have their monthly meetings here. I was sitting at the back of the room one day and I just had the idea, what if we organized a civil rights bus tour for next spring break, and we took people from all over the area and we visited places like the National Peace and Justice Memorial in Alabama, or we visited the Civil Rights Museum. And so we organized this thing. Well, I literally had someone say that they didn't feel comfortable with the church anymore, and that the tour was what pushed them over the edge of making that decision. It's like, well, we're going to museums. We're just learning. Well, you know, if you're, we should be bringing people together and not talking about divisions. Well, how can you bring people together if you don't know each other's stories? If these aren't even taught, how can you possibly do that? So it's just this weird place that we are in right now.
That's wonderful about y'all going. I think that's powerful. And I think your beliefs as a Christian are really what it's about. And sometimes I wonder where all the rest of them are, you know. Anyway, that's wonderful. Now, how are y'all funding the scholarship?
It's through individuals.
Wow,
So
that's
we
wonderful.
put a link on our website. We had an anonymous donor say that they would chip in 1 year's worth of scholarship. It's up to $1,500 each year. And then if Grace publicized it and started, that they would chip in additional funding over the next couple of years. So we've already raised more than $3,000 for it.
That's awesome.
Before we've had anybody apply. So
That's awesome. And what a wonderful way to just recognize and commemorate George Hughes. I mean, it's awesome. I think it really is.
yeah.
How did you find out about the 1930 lynching and burning of the courthouse and the whole thing? Did you know about it before the marker?
I did know about it before the marker. I actually, I don't remember when I first found out the story. It must have been about a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, maybe before that. But I actually write a monthly reflection piece in the newspaper, and I had written something in the summer of last year, 2020, which before we got involved in the marker thing. Just it was at that time when there was this huge discussion about Confederate memorials and whether they should be taken down or not. And I was driving through the downtown here, Grayson County. Sherman is the county seat, so I was driving around the courthouse with my family, and I noticed that there was a group of people who were stationed. We have one of the oldest Confederate memorials anywhere.
I had heard that, yes.
I think it's 1896. This one was put up. So there's a group of people that were stationed right at the base of that guy, that little rebel guy. And then there were a group of protesters on the sidewalk. And so there was probably, I don't know, 50 feet or more distance between the two. And I just thought, as I was sitting there at a red light, the juxtaposition of that. You've got people protecting the statue and others protesting, but they're not talking to one another. And so I wrote in my column about that, and I said, you know, personally, I feel like, and as a history person, I feel like that doesn't belong on the courthouse grounds. It should be in a museum. And I said, you know, what if we took that thing down and put it in a museum? And then I had heard about, I know the answer to the question now. Yeah. A member of our congregation who used to be on faculty at Austin College here in Sherman, she went to the National Peace and Justice Memorial and sent me pictures of the marker that's hanging there. You know, they have a permanent installation of markers that hang from the ceiling. And then they have a second marker that people from that county can come and claim and bring back and install in the county. And so she sends me all these pictures, and that's when I first found out about it. It was probably about 3 years ago. And so I wrote about that in the paper. I said, what if we took that Confederate marker and we got the one in Alabama and we put them together in a museum where they could be in conversation together. And so that was, and I don't know if anybody read that or not. I never heard any response back about that, which is fine. But what would a community look like that really was in conversation with its history in an open and safe way, an inviting way? And so that was my first, when I first started thinking about this. And then as I said, Grace has been part of anti-racist work for a long time. We were invited by our conference, which is the area of Methodist churches geographically in North Texas. We were invited to be a pilot church in a racial justice movement. So churches that were interested in doing racial justice work, anti-racist type work. And so we became part of that. And so we put together a team of people who started thinking about this, and bless you, what could we do? What was going on? And it was actually that team, people on that team, who had the idea for the scholarship fund, and got involved in the movement toward the marker. And so we just kind of jumped on board with other groups in town. There are actually several of them that were working with the county to get a marker on the courthouse grounds. But there are other groups working with the city to get, like, the Black Business District recognized as well.
Right.
And so we didn't have to reinvent anything. We just jumped on board with other people that were doing things already.
Do you think, I mean, why now? Was Melissa starting it just like the spark and everybody was ready for a change, you think? Or
I think George Floyd was the huge thing, with the George Floyd's murder, with the Black Lives Matter movement going on last summer, the protests. It seems like every Sunday I was preaching about that. I was doing something about that. And so it was just kind of all those things coming together at one place.
and people were ready to think differently, do differently, and
Yeah.
get involved.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Especially, taking it, the city of Sherman doing something about the burning of the Black Business District. That's kind of taking the market to another level. I think I've tried to contact the city. I'd like someone to talk to me about it because I think it's so positive, but no go so far.
Yeah.
Had you heard about the previous attempts to get a marker?
No.
Do you think it's important to have this marker on the courthouse grounds in Sherman?
I do, because that's where it happened. It happened on the courthouse grounds. And so, I'm sure Melissa's already told you that there are already 5 or 6 historical markers there. I think one of them makes a reference to a beautiful former courthouse building, but doesn't say anything about why it was destroyed or anything telling you that story. And the reality is this event, the lynching, the destruction of those businesses and homes, the just outright Black people need to move out of Grayson County. All of that had a tremendous impact on Grayson County, not just on Sherman, but on Grayson County. It set this place back decades. But Sherman was on its way to becoming a significant part of North Texas, not just a small town. It had connections, it had railway, it was going to be a central commercial place. And then when this thing happened, it stopped all of that. And so, thinking about how these events, just changed the course of not just George Hughes's life and his family's lives, and not just the lives of those people who were lost, or those businesses, but the whole county. And so I actually went and spoke to the county commissioners a couple months ago in public comments. And, I said, I used the story of Cain and Abel from the book of Genesis, where God says to Cain that Abel's blood is calling to God from the ground. And I said, George Hughes's blood is calling to us from this ground at this courthouse. And we have to act now. We have to stop the silence. So yeah, it has to be there. Yeah.
I had never thought about what you said about setting Sherman back. And that's really interesting, because I do know that the whole thing was reported all over the nation at the time. It was hugely, so people really knew about it. So I could see that it would have turned businesses, turn people off.
Yeah.
Very definitely. I just hadn't thought of it like that way. What if it, I mean, you feel it should be on the courthouse grounds, but what if it came down to some kind of compromise and putting it somewhere else? Do you think the group should compromise or hold out for it on the courthouse grounds?
Well, it looks like it's going to happen. They had the vote to do it. They finally got it done. I think people are still kind of skeptical as to what it's going to look like, if it's going to happen, what the language is going to be on the marker. But if it came down to having it on Mulberry Street, which is where the Black District businesses were, if it came down to having something there or having nothing, I would take the Mulberry Street place. Okay. But I think it should be both. I think that there should be several.
I agree with you.
Yeah, and I'm part of a interdenominational ministerial alliance as well here in Grayson County and Sherman, and most of the churches in that group are African American churches, and one of the goals that group is working toward is creating vehicles for minority-owned businesses to be able to get funding and startup money and those kind of things. So, it's much more than just the lynching of George Hughes. It's also the whole community history. And so it really ought, and there's a movement out of Austin College, some people working there to get some kind of arts district going up here in Sherman, and to have some murals or something like that telling the story as part of that permanent display. So because it impacted so many different places and people across Sherman and Grayson County, I think we should have multiple observances of it.
That makes sense. And I mean, different entities coming in to do different things. Mm-hmm. That, to me, that looks like healing.
Yeah.
That's you kind of told me already, but why did your church decide to get involved? Was it just because you thought it was the Christian thing to do, or I'm sorry, what?
Well, we just felt like it connected with who we were as a congregation and what we wanted to portray to the community, that we are a place that cares about I mean, part of our vision, our vision is to embrace all, engage with Jesus, and expand the kingdom. And so we thought, embracing all means that we want to be an inclusive and welcoming place. And so here's an opportunity to show that to the community, that we're not just saying that to hang on a wall somewhere, but we're actually involved in the conversation about what it means to embrace all. We don't want to just put together a statement that says we are anti-racist, we are welcoming of all people. We want to be doing that work. And so if there's already work happening and we can jump in and partner with, then that helps us to fulfill what we feel like we've been called to do, as well as help to make our community a more just society as well. So it was just kind of a thing where it was just an obvious connection between our leadership, with me, and things that we saw going on locally, but also around the country.
Gotcha. How do you think the marker will be seen by the African American community in Sherman and the county, if it's awarded?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think it will be. I think it'll be complicated, so it'll be the kind of thing that people have seen others trying before and it not coming through, and so there'll be some kind of relief, some kind of response, some kind of surprise. I've heard some kind of pause from some people in the African American community that this is reopening a lot of wounds, that what's the danger in that, could this lead to violence in the future? Could it lead to more disappointment in justice not being served, or this healing not some other obstacle coming up to stop any kind of progress? So part of me thinks there'll be a lot of excitement and not excitement, this isn't the right word, relief, maybe feeling more hopeful about Grayson County. But I think there's also a sense of kind of trepidation in the community as well.
That some of them would rather forget about it, just like the white people in the county. Yeah,
just because people have tried before and failed, and what's the use, kind of thing. I think it's.
Do you think some of the other kind of more positive things, like the mural you were talking about, or if the city does something to recognize the burning of the Black disc, would you think that would be a more positive or an additional kind of, put the icing on the cake if they get it?
Yeah, if it's a multi-pronged thing, and that, like what I was saying earlier about microloans to small businesses, if there are funds put toward making a lasting impact that kind of rights some of the wrongs.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, it's significant economic impact in 1930 as well as emotional.
Right. I mean, for the whole county, because losing, nothing, no insurance for anybody, that was really a blow, especially during the Depression, the worst part.
Right.
Do you think, is the city of Sherman talking about like setting aside funds for Black businesses?
I don't know if the city is talking about that, or if the ideas are, just kind of raising money for that through private donations or corporate donations or whatever.
Gotcha.
I don't know if there's public funds going for it.
Okay. But and you've talked about the impact more than just Sherman, into the whole county. Do you think getting the marker or some of these other things that we've talked about will spill over to the whole county? I mean, as far as a healing kind of factor?
I do think so. Like I said, most people in this county don't even know this story. And so uh, when they hear it, I'm not going to speak on behalf of all people here, but there's a kind of like, why isn't that story told? And why haven't we done anything about that? Why did we allow that to happen? There's a lot of feeling of, if we get this marker installed, if we do these other things, it will ensure that these things never happen again. It'll be our generation of residents saying, this is not who we are in 2022, rather than who we were in 1930. And so, I think making a public stance in that way will be very affirming for the community and for people looking to move into this community, right?
Yes.
Sherman.
That would be very powerful, very powerful.
Yeah.
Okay. So, we've kind of talked about this, but for healing, it's really more than just the marker. I mean, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but it seems like that's what we've talked about, that healing for everybody really involves more than just sticking a marker on the courthouse grounds and walking away.
Yeah, I heard someone mention on social media the other day about visiting the Hiroshima Memorial in Japan, as an American, and she said, I wasn't alive then. I had nothing to do with that decision to drop the bomb there, but I still feel awful about what happened, and I can make a commitment to live my life in a more peaceful and just way. Or my wife and I served in England 20 years ago, and I'll always remember going to visit Coventry Cathedral there, which was destroyed in World War II and rebuilt. And they had these amazing monuments all the way around that cathedral of peace and justice. And so standing in that place where this destruction happened, these lives were lost in war or in acts of hate or whatever, and able to learn from that and grow from it. For me, that's the key for healing and moving forward is it's the same kind of thing as if we've hurt someone ourselves, owning that, apologizing for it, making restitution where necessary, and committing to not doing that anymore, stopping that behavior, learning from it. And so, as a Christian, I believe that God's grace is working within us and renewing us and shaping us into the people that God would have us to be. And that is not only as an individual, it's also collectively. And so doing these kind of things to help remember our past, to tell the story, enable people to go forward. One thing I said to those commissioners in that little 3-minute speech was the silence about this, the not teaching it, the not speaking of it, the dismissing of it, is an act of violence. It is perpetrating harm on people by pretending this thing never happened. And so, all we're asking is just to tell the story. We're not asking for anything beyond that, but to recognize that it happened. And now we can hopefully move on and learn from it.
Well, to the people who and I'm sure some people have said this to you, that of course we're shame that this happened, but going over it isn't going to help. And we just need to move on and act differently today.
Yeah, I mean, we observe Pearl Harbor Day, right? We observe the 20th anniversary of 9/11 a couple months ago. These are stories that we tell collectively because they're who we are as a people. I think at some point in the future, COVID-19 is going to be a similar thing. We're going to be able to talk about it in a way that's honest, to say this pandemic had major traumatic impact on all of us. And so how do we move forward from that? We can't just forget that it happened. I mean, 700,000 Americans have died. And so, being able to be aware of what is happening and name it, grieve it, is a path forward. It helps us to live into the future that God is trying to fashion around us. So our church, we recently passed 500 deaths in Grayson County from COVID-19. We put 500 white flags on our property out here, and we put signs up. We put a table out where we put benches out where people can just come and reflect. They can write the names of people on that white flag, someone who died of COVID in Grayson County. This is a way of memorializing that and honoring and praying for those families. It's the same process with this marker. We have to honor that past and tell the story in order to go forward as a people.
I think you were so right. I think you were so right, and that's why it is important that it's done. I want to thank you so much for speaking with me. You spoke so eloquently about so much of it. It's, I think so many of us know that it's the right thing to do, but sometimes you can't articulate that. And I certainly appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to speak with me.
Well, I really appreciate the invitation. I probably got a little bit too much of preaching a sermon.
Oh, not at all. Not at all. It's I think the story needs to, what the work that y'all are doing now to get it needs to be told. And so these interviews will be saved to, in the archives for historians to look out later and see how it was accomplished and what changed. And I think that's powerful for people to learn about today, that something changed and people decided to do things differently.
Yeah.
And that's really good. Anyway, well, again, thank you so much. Have a great Thanksgiving. And I will also send you a link and you can download a copy of this if you would like.
Okay, great. And good luck on the rest of your project.
Oh, thank you so much.